Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, this month marks the 30th anniversary of the horrible Oklahoma City bombing. We'll be talking to a survivor next.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
I am a proud sponsor of Success North Dallas, and the third Wednesday of the month, they always have incredible speakers. They've been having incredible speakers for more than 3 decades, but I was absolutely blown away by the speaker I heard this morning. He literally had me in tears, and so I had to have him in the studio to celebrate his life and his journey, and him sharing a very painful story with an audience. Captain Randy Norfleet is in the studio. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, 30 years ago, and you've been asked to tell this story thousands and thousands of times. Does it ever get easier?
No, it doesn't. As we remember those terrible times, it brings the same pain back every time.
Because in order for you to accurately describe it, you actually have to go back.
Yes, I have. Yes, and it's a movie that plays in my head. Yes.
Wow. Okay, more from Captain Norfleet in a second. He's been interviewed thousands of times. I found this one clip, and let's go ahead and roll that.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for this special edition of Oklahoma Horizon. Well, April 19th, 1995 is a date that for those of us in Oklahoma brings up similar feelings that 9/11 does for the country. But unlike 9/11, this was an attack not by some foreign agents, but by one of our own, shaking the very safety and security that you feel living here in the middle of America. Today, we take you back to the moments before the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building, to a time when we were all 20 years younger and still naive to the hatred that was about to strike the heartland. For Marine Captain Randy Norfleet and his wife Jamie, April 19, 1995 could not have started off better.
You thought it was your lucky day because you had just gotten a prime parking spot.
Yeah, and I thought it was my lucky day because it was about 9 o'clock in the morning and I had gotten a front row parking spot.
In downtown Oklahoma City, at the Murrah Federal Building,
I noticed this yellow Ryder truck in front of the Oklahoma City Federal Building. And I thought it was a little bit strange, but what was unusual to me is that they had parked it right in front of the red loading zone of the building. And that was just not military for a military person to park in a non-parking zone. So then this guy got out of the truck and he ran across the street.
because inside sat a 5,000-pound fertilizer bomb, set to explode within minutes. Unaware, Norfleet heads up to the Marine recruiting station on the 6th floor.
I just walked straight into the operations office, and I ran into a young man, a young Marine, and his name was Sergeant Benjamin Davis.
An enlisted Marine who Norfleet had helped to take his boards to become an officer.
He was like, "Captain Norfleet, can you call Headquarters Marine Corps and find out if I was selected for this board?" And so I called and I got a busy signal, and I hung up the phone, and I looked at Sergeant Davis and I said, "You know what, I'll come back in 5 minutes, right? Because we all think we've got another 5 minutes." I walked into the next office over, which was our supply department, and the next thing I know, a big explosion goes off. The concussion of the bomb made my vision go out, but it didn't knock me unconscious. As the shrapnel started to hit me, I was able to throw my left arm in front of my left eye, which saved me and put shrapnel all through my arm. But I have a big piece of glass that came and it cut open, cut my forehead and lodged in my right eye. The glass facade of the building shattered first and came in first, but the explosion of the bomb shattered the support columns of the building, and so the building started to collapse on each other. And so as the 8th, 9th, and 7th floor hit the 6th floor, the impact of that threw me into the west wall of the Oklahoma City Federal Building. It left me unconscious, it fractured my skull and broke my nose, and I was left bleeding, what I found out later, with 2 open arteries there in the building. I'm not really sure how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, it was just, to me, it was deathly quiet. All I could hear were the fires of all the cars in the parking lot that were on fire, and off in the distance I could hear fire alarms going off.
Wow, I got chills. So I want you to pick up the story from there. You're lying there, about to bleed out, and what happens next?
So the Sergeant Snydecor, who I was speaking to, he was actually sitting in a chair with a high back to it, so he missed a lot of the shrapnel coming that hit me. So he was able to help pick me up out of the rubble, and he had he is a combat veteran from Desert Storm, so very calm and cool under pressure, and he cleared off his desk and started to administer first aid to me there. While I was there in the on that desk, I was in shock. I had a lot of blood loss, and obviously I had a piece of glass in my eye, and I really didn't know what to do. But while I was on that table, I just heard a clear, still voice, a small voice telling me that I needed to get off of that table. And so, as I shared this morning, we worship a personal God who takes care of us in the dire times. And so that's what I believe happened to me, is that I was able to witness and experience a personal God at a very traumatic time. And that was, if I had have stayed there on that desk, I would have bled out like so many other people did in that building. And so, as I had mentioned, as I got up off of that table, that the dust had settled in the building, and that there was a bright red blood trail that led to the back of the building as somebody had left before me. And, and as we had discussed this morning, I mean, that's the same thing, is that, the blood can save us too. And so, so for me, it was just really, as I go back and look at it and think about it, it's just very a surreal experience, because I wasn't able to do all that in my own power. I had to have help.
Yes. One of the moments, and you walked to the hospital, but one of the moments that really got me tearing up is when you started to talk about your wife. Tell me about your thoughts about your wife, because you had no way to contact her.
Right. So, actually, my wife's side of the story is probably more compelling than mine. She was, we had a 12-month-old son at the time. She was 7 months pregnant, and we also had a 4-year-old. So we had 2 kids, and the third one was on the way. And so, when I went into surgery, I had the nurse, I had her write down my wife's phone number. And so, 5 or 6 hours later, when I got out of surgery, that nurse was able to call my wife. And so she, in her experience, in her story, she had just dropped our oldest son off at the church daycare, And she got home, and one of the ladies in her Bible study had called her and said, "Hey, Jamie, you need to look and see what's going on about the Oklahoma City bombing." Because, it was one of the first big events to be their helicopter in the air. It was very live. So my wife, she turned on the phone, or the TV, and she was immediately able to see my Black Ryder truck because, as you know, I parked right in front of Timothy McVeigh's truck. And so immediately she assumed the worst, that I had passed and that type of thing. And so one of the interesting things, like we discussed this morning, is that one of my lieutenants came to the house, and she thought that was a notification officer. So she thought he was coming to bring notification of my passing. But fortunately, he didn't know anything, and she let him in the house because initially she had refused to let him in. And so then later that afternoon, she got a call. She comes down to the hospital, and the scene was chaotic. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people there at the emergency room entrance at St. Anthony's Hospital. And, it was just very sad because all the people that were there saying, "Have you seen my son? Have you seen my daughter, mother, father?" That type of thing. And my wife was very thankful that she knew that I was there. And the doctors had called and said, "Hey, Randy's lost a lot of blood. We're not sure he's going to make it through the night, so you need to come and say goodbye to your husband." So as she had come in, just the whole trauma of the whole event, like I said, she was 7 months pregnant. She goes into labor, as she's coming to the hospital. So as she's checking into the hospital, then the nurse says, "Well, I see your husband's in ICU, but honey, you're in labor. You're going to go to the maternity ward first." And so they sent her to the maternity ward, and they were able to stop the contractions, and my daughter was actually born 2 months later at full term. And so, not only did I experience a lot of trauma, but my wife experienced more trauma than I did, because her whole life was shattered in that moment.
And because you were one of the first eyewitnesses, you were actually a key piece of the trial. And then,
Yes.
Yeah, share, what was that like going on the witness stand?
So my part of the trial is I saw Timothy McVeigh get out of the truck and run across the street and down the alleyway there. And so because of that, I was the second witness in the Oklahoma City bombing trial in Denver against Timothy McVeigh. And one of the interesting things about that is that my wife, while she was in the courtroom while I was there, and I was just sitting feet away. Courtrooms are a lot smaller than you realize.
Sure.
And as I was on the witness stand, I remember looking into Timothy McVeigh's eyes, and there just was nothing there. It was like a dark evil. It was like there wasn't a person there. And so I realized at that moment that there was no empathy, no compassion for anything that he'd done, and that I needed to forgive him for my own health. Because if I carried all of the anger that he had created inside of me, I knew that eventually it would eat me up inside. So right there in that courtroom, I made a decision to forgive him. Now, at the same time, my wife was in the courtroom, and she was sitting next to Timothy McVeigh's mother, and so they kind of struck up a conversation. And one of the really, to me, one of the sad things is that his mother was just a regular grandmother, just a regular mom who thought she had raised a good kid, but now here she is put into a spotlight, and all this anger is given towards them. And so So my wife was there sitting next to her and was able to comfort her and give her some peace as much as we could at that time. And so it was just a very good experience to meet with them and to resolve those, to give that forgiveness and to be able to move forward in life and not carry all of the anger and bitterness that can come with an event like that. And so the trial was a very pivotal moment in my wife and I's life experience.
And you go around the country speaking. You're a very popular speaker. We've got a little footage. I think you were speaking to a high school in this video. So tell us about recounting these stories. So you just confessed to me that it's difficult to retell this story all the time. Do you feel like God put you in that building for a reason?
Yeah, well, like I've said, I quoted Viktor Frankl in his book, The Man's Search for Meaning, and he says that if you can find purpose in your suffering, that your suffering turns into a sacrifice. And so I've kind of taken that to heart, to find the purpose and why did this happen to me? Because, I was a pilot. I was wanting to go fly for the airlines. I was on a career. And then all of a sudden, just in the blink of an eye, my career is over. I'm blinded in my right eye. I have two of my Marine friends, brothers, that are killed. And my whole life just turned on a dime, right? And so I had to find the purpose in what had happened to me. And so part of my purpose is to encourage other people, because my tragedy happened on public TV and it was a national event and everybody remembers it. And so I like to use my the events that happened to me to connect with other people that have had more of a personal tragedy that maybe not everybody knows about, right? But I can encourage them through my experience of how to overcome the tragedies of life, and instead of them being a stumbling block in my life, to be a stepping stone to the next level of life, right? And to grow and mature as a young man then, right? Yes. and so that has been my purpose, is to take all of the bad and turn it into good, right?
We're unfortunately we're almost out of time, so we've got a couple of minutes for you to look into that camera on the left and challenge the audience to find their purpose. I think we all find excuses to wallow in our own pain, loss of a loved one, loss of a job. Leave us with some final thoughts.
Yeah, and so what was very real is it's very easy to become a victim and to allow your tragedy to define who you are, right? And you've got to move past your tragedy, and you've got to find that purpose that the Lord has given you in your life, so that you can turn your tragedy from a stumbling block into a stepping stone. And that's how I believe you can do that.
Wow, absolutely profound. Thank you so much for sharing your testimony with us and your heart. We're going to end with his LinkedIn page so you can get in touch with him. There it is on the screen. Captain Randy Norfleet, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You bet. That's it for now. We'll see you next time.